Hi, this is Robert Kiyosaki, and you're listening to Capital Hacking. This is the most important thing you can listen to today.
You are invited. Yes, you. You are invited to the December 6th and 7th VIP experience called Learn and Grow. It's where the accountable equity investors who are already partners meet up with keynote speakers. We learn trends in alternative investing. We learn directly from our peers, and we also meet new friends. And we'd love for you to become a new friend of ours and benefit from this. I would call it an accredited investor mastermind, where there'll be keynote speakers like Gino from Jake and Gino and Julia Barbaro speaking on all topics related to alternative investing, family legacy, and incredible life-changing topics, as well as Jeff Rutt. Now, Jeff Rutt is famous for impacting the world with over a $1.5 billion measurable impact on the world's most needy. Cannot wait to share that story with you. Couple that with great massage treatments, unique chef experiences, the ice skating wonderland with 20 different amenities going on. Your kids will love it. You'll love it. Your spouses are going to love it. Everyone's going to love it. We made sure it meets all different personality types. It's a fun experience. It's time for us to break bread. We'd love to have you there.
Here's the one.
I have a dream.
With great power comes great responsibility.
I could do this all day.
This is it. Don't get scared now.
They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom.
Cinderella's story out of nowhere.
Did you know that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself?
Capital Hacking begins in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to the big show. Josh McCallen here. John, Edwin, thank you for doing this with us.
Dude, it's so fun. It is such an honor to be podcasting with you. And, week after week, it's been awesome for the last few years.
I agree. What a gift it's been. And by the way, can I introduce a new friend to you and to the world?
Yeah.
You and I just had the best time getting to know him together. Michael RodriGuez. This guy is a CPA. He's a leader of business. He's a professional board member. He happens to be a Baylor professor, which is an incredibly elite, awesome school out of Waco, Texas. And actually, Melanie and I met him when we were pursuing the opportunity to support Chip and Joanna on their hotel ventures, which didn't work out, but we did end that effort with a great friend in Michael RodriGuez when he was serving on that.
Yeah, and I loved how intentional he is about his life, specifically in leadership and legacy. And you guys are going to hear all about it. Wonderful show. Buckle up. Let's go.
Yeah, very excited today, John Edwin. Michael RodriGuez, one of my heroes, is on the big show. So thank you for doing this with me, John.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for, to hear everything from Michael as well, because we're just getting to know each other. And it seems like he's a man of faith, a man of conviction, and definitely, pursues purpose. So Michael, take us away. Can you give us a little background on who you are?
Yeah, guys. Well, I certainly am honored to be on. Josh knows one of my greatest passions is about being passionate. And I try to pursue that in every factor of my life. My background is pretty simple. You mentioned John being from Philly. I'm originally from the Bronx in New York. As a kid, moved out to Southern California when I was younger, and really kind of grew up there for the most part. Went to undergraduate to pursue an accounting degree at the University of Southern California, a master's degree eventually at Stanford University. And really have pursued leading businesses for the last 35 years, focused on early stage companies. At a variety of stages. I've been chief financial officer, chief operating officer. But the greatest accomplishment, obviously, having my faith in Christ is the greatest and most significant thing I've done. The second most significant thing is marrying my wife of now 29 years, Helen, and then we have 2 kids, Jared, 26, and Courtney, about to be 24, and about to get married. So you guys are going to have to hold me up through the course of this, because the closer that gets, the weaker my legs get. But, fast forwarding, I stand now at Baylor University. I'm a professor in the accounting and business law department. One of the great pursuits of my life is really just about how do I establish legacy? How do I leverage the experiences that God has given me in the C-suite of companies, but now to do that in a way that I'm truly passing on a baton to this next generation and the things I think that most matter. And then at the same time, I do a lot of work with boards of directors. I'm on the board of several companies where I, again, get to establish some rudiments around the things that I've learned in the course of leading organizations and people, and allowing this next generation of business leaders really the opportunity to kind of leverage the things that I've done, the mistakes that I've made, perhaps the learnings that I've made, and to do that in a way that helps them to be even more successful. And, whether that's in the context of operating businesses, family offices, family-owned businesses, I've had experiences in all of those. And again, bringing it right back to where we started, what I really want to do is to help embody passion in the pursuits that people are going after. So that's where I stand. You're finding me in Waco, Texas at this moment, gentlemen.
Woo! Big old Texas. Can't beat Texas. Everything's bigger in Texas, they say.
Indeed it is.
And by the way, you have a beautiful home there, so we'll have to get into that later. But let's talk a little more about your title. Your title on LinkedIn, which is a great way for people to follow up with you, because we would love for all those that are inspired by Michael to feel free to reach out to him, Michael RodriGuez. But your title says Visionary Financial Leader, correct? And
Yes,
I
sir,
know you're an intentional man. That
Yes,
is
sir.
not normal to put those two words juxtaposition. You did that on purpose. Tell us why you chose that as your positioning.
Yeah, I absolutely did. I think, well, first and foremost, the way that I've led throughout the course of my career is fundamentally not to be routine, not to be stereotypical, right? At the end of the day, what I've been blessed with is a lot of business opportunities and circumstances where, I might have developed rudiments in my schooling and rudiments in my training as a young CPA and Arthur Anderson back in the day. But at the end of the day, when you go into a business environment, the key thing is, what do I do to understand what are the circumstances that are going on? It's like if you were to go and chart a course in an airplane. I'm not an aviator, but I understand enough to know that if I'm charting a course to go from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport to Salt Lake City, you know where you're going, right? And so you don't just set the course and get off on the pursuit. There's going to be a whole lot of other factors interacting with that aircraft and pushing it off. And so you have to have the mechanism to understand, okay, well, what are the things that I'm going to rely on to tell me if I'm on my course or not? And then ultimately, how do I use those instruments to help me figure out the degree to which I'm off? And then ultimately, I've got to make decisions real time to pursue getting back on course. So when we talk about vision in the context of a financial role, it's all about those things. I'm not coming into a company just to report numbers once a month or once a quarter. I'm there to help provide the instrument panel necessary to help the rest of the organization know, are we going where we think we're supposed to be going? Or are we just about to fly into the side of a mountain? And then if so, how do we avoid doing that? And to my mind, if in today's world of being a financial leader, if you're not doing it that way, then literally you're not providing any meaningful service that you couldn't just buy from an outsourced accounting or bookkeeping firm. No disrespect to any of those folks, obviously.
Well, Michael, I'll tell you a little backstory. I met Michael years ago when you were in Waco. So I don't know much of your story before Waco. So before Waco, because that's where you are today, one would love for you to share a little more about your passion for Baylor and all the other work you've done, including Unbound.
Yes, sir.
Really important to both you and I was just with Tyler Goebbels this past week. But let's go back to in California. You're in California. Yeah. What was your last opportunity there, and what made you make the jump to Waco?
Yeah, so for the 15 years prior to getting here, and we moved here in 2018, I was engaged in a variety of life sciences businesses, primarily around cancer. And so both in the area of cancer diagnostics and different types of tests, both genomic and other platforms of testing, as well as in cancer treatment through a medical device company that I led for a few years. And so again, when it comes down to being passionate, one, I can be passionate again about anything, but when you're actually going into the operating room and you're seeing a patient that's being treated and potentially saved by the technology that your company undergirds, that means a great deal, and it brings it very, very close to the heart of what really matters in any business, for that matter. So that was a lot of what I was doing. I developed a significant passion for it, but we got to this point where our oldest, our son Jared, was getting ready to go to college, and he decided he wanted to go to Baylor. And earlier in my career, I'd worked in Texas and really just grew a significant love for just the culture of Texas and, what it was like. And having been both from the East Coast and the West Coast, I got plenty of exposure to them. But there was just something about the heart of this state that drew me in. And so my wife and I, had an awful lot of discussion about it. We talk a lot about the fact argue. We just have intense fellowship from time to time. We had a little bit of intense fellowship over the desire to move because, as you know, Josh, Helen was born and raised in Southern California, and until the moment that we got here, hadn't lived anywhere else. But there was just this idea that a couple things were confluencing. One, not just the desire to see where God was calling us in that moment, but, you know, we got to Waco and we really got to learn about it while Jared was in his first year of school. And we began to build some friendships and engage at a local church, of which we're now part. But we really felt like there was something demonstrative happening from this epicenter in Waco, in the heart of Texas is what we call it, in the center of the state, that there was something that God was doing in Waco, Texas, and renewing it and restoring it from its past, which is relatively speckled, but also what he was initiating from here. He was initiating something from Waco, Texas, and we just felt like we were called to be a part of it. Now, whether that's us engaging with the students here, we're very involved. Obviously, I am on campus, but also, as you know as well, with our college ministry at our church, we just feel like at this stage, it's time for us to leverage what we've developed, things we've gone through and experienced, and all of that. And how do we now pass it off to the next group in a way that makes it not just what it was, but makes it able to grow to bigger and much more significant impact.
Before we get back to finance, what's curious to me is, and John, have you ever been to Baylor, John?
I've never, no.
Okay.
Consider this an open invitation, by the way, John.
It's amazing.
Oh,
by the way, now that you're on the inner sanctum, I do need to come back and have you show me around.
Absolutely.
What a great school. And, you know, people like Gary Keller went there, John. I mean, I don't know all the famous people that have moved the world.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I remember 3-4 years ago, they were in the race for the National Football Championship. Didn't they win the the NCAA basketball too? I mean,
we did. Absolutely. Have a great coach who's still here and still pushing that very, very diligently.
And on top of that, though, it's just been a stalwart for forming young people to be servant leaders, right? I mean, just a great academic program for years and years and years. And I don't know, it wasn't on my radar too long ago, but it's become, it's got a great national standing, doesn't it? As far as it's well respected.
Yeah, it does. Well, and so look, I have the real significant blessing. I get to speak to thousands of parents a year at these invitation-only events that the admissions team puts on. And it's the unique perspective that I get to bring, because obviously having served at Magnolia for the several years that I was there, I happened to be a professional here in Waco and see and interact with the university at the upper levels of its administration. I was a parent, of course, to both of our kids who graduated from here in 2023, and now I'm a professor. And so what I get to share with the parents all the time is, look, the things that you hear about our university, and there's great universities everywhere. I happen to be wearing the logo for my alma mater, which is not Baylor, but one, you hear that it's an academically rigorous university. That's absolutely true. You hear that our athletics are exceptional. That's true, and it's been demonstrated. You hear that the professors care very deeply about their students, not just from the point of view of academics, but for their life and their development and their future leadership. It's categorically true. You hear that we do excellent research. We're an R1 institution.
Wow.
And that is another, sort of significant step of progress the university's made the last 3 or 4 years. So it's all real. And so again, it's a platform that I think is just overwhelming at times, that I get to participate in doing this stuff and get to have an opportunity to not only invest in the next generation of students, but again, in the context of what I'm trying to do in the business world, continue to push forward the development of leadership and leadership teams and, their achievements and hopefully enabling them to accomplish more for my presence than it would obviously for my absence.
Yeah, Michael, you seem incredibly intentional in your life, and I love that. Let's talk a little bit about legacy. What does legacy mean to you, and how are you moving that ball forward?
Yeah, that's such a great question, John. I'm really grateful for it. A number of years ago, we had formed this little group of 8 dads and 8 sons. All these boys were about the same age, and we called it Legacy Club. And part of the reason that we wanted to do that is because there were a bunch of other things pulling on our sons' times. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't just, and this is how I've normally said it, that we don't just, kind of have an impact and leave like a fingerprint on something. I wanted to leave a lasting imprint. And in my mind, the difference of an imprint is something that is deeper and longer lasting. Like I want every encounter that I have, and I don't do this perfectly by any stretch, but I want the encounters that I have to have long-term, lasting, differential meaning. I want someone to be left differently for my presence. Otherwise, my presence means nothing. So for our son, for instance, and it's equivalent with our daughter, but our son and I used to take what I used to call our annual college football pilgrimage once a year. We'd take a random college football game somewhere. We couldn't go to the Pac-12 because both my undergrad and graduate institutions at those days were in the Pac-12. And I let him choose a football game, and we would go travel and have a long weekend, eat terrible food, and, learn somebody else's football team's cheers. And we wanted to do that because I wanted him to then turn around and be able to do that with his son and his son's son and so forth. And it's a little bit of the same thing. As I look back on the 35 years in the organizations I've been privileged to serve, I still maintain a lot of those relationships today. I don't work with them. I don't necessarily, have ongoing conversations or whatever, but there's still a lot of those relationships that are tight, that are foundational still, where I can be having a dialogue. Someone calls me up and says, hey, I'm running into this situation. Can you help me think through it? Can you be a sounding board? I want to do that for my students. I still have students come into my office, and this is not meant to be braggadocious, but I have students come to my office today that I had in my class 2 years ago. And it's simply because I've endeavored to, perhaps somewhat successfully, left them different. And look, the closer I think we get to the end of our days, right, the more we realize that those fleeting moments that we have afforded to us by God are, those are less and less and less, just demonstratively by time. And so I want to be more intentional about it. I want to be much more purposeful about not just asking how someone's doing, but really wondering how they're doing and allowing them space and time to describe it to me and having the chance to encourage. I think the greatest gift we can give to someone else is to encourage them and let them know that God sees them, God knows them, God loves them, and that he's just using you or me for this one little minute time in eternity to let them know that. And hopefully maybe it's a little bit greater wind in their sail or fuel in their tank or whatever it might be.
Well, we're going to nickname you Barnabas.
I love Barnabas. He's one of my favorites in the Bible for sure, man. Absolutely.
So for those listening, Barnabas was known as the encourager.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Now you see why
his name means son of encouragement, in fact. So that's why I'm like, yeah, if somebody calls me that someday, I'll live the good life.
Yeah, and you can see, John, what I meant when I said, man, it's a special soul. We got to get this guy on the podcast, I should say the phone. Because there's also a lot more Michael's doing these days, right? You're bringing so much of this wisdom you've been building over these 35 years. And what I'm excited about, I can't wait to get the word out about, is you have a thriving advisory business to boards. And I'll put it in layman's terms, and you can qualify it. Not only are you extremely happy in Waco and extremely happy with your students, you're also actively, whether it be virtually or whatever you call it, travel, you're serving on boards all around the country, helping entrepreneurial enterprises and larger companies chart their vision and continue their board's directive to fulfill their mission and ministry and legacy and or whatever. So that is I remember when I met you and you talked about that, you have several clients now. You've worked with private equity companies. Tell us a little more about the work as a professional board member.
Yeah, it's one of the most enthralling times of my career. And it's interesting to say that because, I'm walking into roles now that I have previously served under. And I've had a lot of great analogs of people that I've served as my directors of my companies that I can, kind of hearken back to and understand how they approached me and how they approached our leadership. One of the things I love is, earlier in my career, what I loved about being an auditor for a public accounting firm was that I got to go into a variety of different environments from time to time. And it were different companies, different industries, different situations. And one of the intellectual curiosities in my undergrad years that kind of pushed me in the direction of accounting as a background was, look, what makes certain companies do well, certain companies not do well, what makes certain leaders successful and other leaders unsuccessful, or what drives their decision making. And now I get to actually come in contextually after a variety of experiences in my life, you know this, Josh, but over 35 years, I've done, IPOs, I've done secondary offerings in the public markets, over $750 million of acquisitions and mergers, both buy side and sell side. I've done bank deals and, undone some bank deals. I've wound up companies. Last person in one of my businesses and literally turned off the lights when we sold it, to another company. So unless and until I get to take that amalgamation of experiences and bring it to someone else, it's hollow to me. And so I love the fact that, so one of the companies I serve on the board of is North Coast Holdings. It's a business up in Rochester, New York. They do some pretty significant industrial services for municipalities and utilities around the United States. They've been around for 85 years, right? And here I am. I've been a director in their board and a chair of a committee for 3 years. But now I'm at a place where they had hit about $500 million in revenue, but we're kind of feeling stuck. And now I get to come in there and be some sort of a little bit of an influence to help kind of get them unstuck. How do we look at what they do in a different way? How do we reframe the very assets that they bring to the picture? How do we then also help them? And they've literally turned over just about all of their leadership team. New CEO came in 4 years ago and new head of strategy. How do we come and invigorate what might feel like, no, we're not super vigorous because we're stuck and we're kind of feeling like we're just kind of plateauing. No. That we never accept plateau. You never look at it in a framework that's constraining. We just how do we break apart the constraints? Another company I'm on the board of is doing medical diagnostics, some incredibly neat work over in Vancouver, Washington, completely opposite side of the country. And they've built their business really just a very close circle of owners, 5 folks who started this business a number of years ago and who are saying, hey, we've got to figure out how to now double time this a little bit. How do we wind up picking up the pace of our growth and our impact in the medical world? How do we change how people are engaging with tests? How do we bring sample gathering into the house? And how do we make that easy logistically to do? So it's just so great to be at the forefront of those things. It's great to let people know that when you feel like you can't get past a barrier, let me tell you how you can, because I have in the past. And a lot of times I say, look, this isn't going to be a copy paste, but it's going to be a copy paste special, right? Leave it to an Excel geek to use that phraseology. But it's not the same. It might be similar. And it might be that somehow with another set of eyes, you can look at it differently. One of the things we talk about a lot in board governance these days is diversity in the broadest possible context, right? Diversity of viewpoints, diversity of experiences, diversity of whatever it might be, so that we bring the greatest decision making that we can into the boardroom. And at the end of the day, now all we're doing is we're overseeing management in their conduct of carrying out their operating plans and the strategic goals. But I want to make sure that I can help them do that in a better way.
That was great. That's absolutely awesome, Michael. Now, I know you've worked very closely with Chip and Joanna Gaines. At what capacity did you work with them for their show and everything else?
Hi, this is Melanie McCallen. Josh and I are just so grateful for the many investors who have already joined us at Accountable Equity. Accountable Equity is so much more than a capital group. It's really a community of accredited investors that want to learn and grow together. I just want to personally invite you, if you want to find out more about this type of investment and see if it's right for you and your family, please visit us at accountableequity.com.
Hey, it's Hal Elrod, author of The Miracle Morning, and you're listening to Capital Hacking. Enjoy.
John was asking a little bit about your work with Magnolia. Now, I know the fun part of the beginning of that story, John, is, Michael just came to Baylor and to be with his children and to work from Waco. And it was actually his wife that met the relatives and the family of the Gaines, right?
Oh, wow.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, John, it's one of those stories that it's got to be true, because I'm not smart enough to make up something like this. Our son had his first year at Baylor and was about to start his second. And my wife and I really kind of decided to be more intentional about getting here to Texas. And so I started coming and cultivating some relationships on the basis that it's going to take 18, 24 months to find a suitable role. And I happened to be in Austin just having some meetings. My wife was here in Waco, went to the one and only Target store that we've got here in Waco with our son, finished up shopping. She walks into the ladies' restroom, and as she's walking back to the restroom, she thinks to herself, I wonder if I will ever run into
Joanna Gaines's mom. And the reason that she even thought about that is my wife by lineage is Korean. Joanna Gaines's mom is also Korean. And I think that there was some sort of connection / affinity that my wife might have had. Well, sure enough, she goes in the ladies' restroom. She comes out of the stall and had heard someone walk in. She looks over, and lo and behold, it is a lady named Nan Stevens, who is Joanna Gaines's mother.
No way. That's crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so my wife is not the introvert, or rather the extrovert that I am. And she finally feels like the nudge to speak with her and does. And Mrs. Stevens had 3 of her grandchildren with her and was certainly not looking to meet any fans in that particular moment in the ladies' room. And my wife then felt the nudge to speak to her in Korean, which is neither of their language of preference, but my wife capitulated and did. And they have this 2-minute conversation that was fantastic. And really, Mrs. Stevens melted. Well, some friends of ours caught wind of that. A few weeks later, I was back kind of doing my circuit of networking, and a friend reached out and he said, "Hey, Jerry Stevens, Joanna Gaines's dad, wants to meet with you for breakfast." And I said, "Sure, I love breakfast. I'm happy to connect." And I didn't know why we were, but a few days hence, we got together and another gentleman joined him, and they shared with me in that moment, "Hey, we got a new leadership in the business right now, and we are looking for a chief financial officer. I'm not sure if you would be interested." And I said, "Well, I'm certainly interested, happy to have a conversation and explore that." And quite literally 2 months later, we were living in Waco. I moved into the house that ultimately we purchased from Chip and Joanna. And from that moment commenced a 3.5-year journey that was just extraordinary.
Wow. It's awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, we live in that house today still. And it was funny because as we were just kind of dialoguing about my compensation package and those things, the gentleman that I worked for who served Chip and Joanna as the president of the companies, he was one of those guys who really liked to think outside the box in terms of, how do I make sure that the compensation package could be really germane? And he's like, "Hey, I heard you looked at this house. We happen to own it. Would you be interested in making a deal?" And we sure did. And man, it feels like home. It feels like it was meant to be. And again, we just watched so many things come together that way. And it was just a blessing serving Chip and Joanna. I literally just texted Chip yesterday. It was his 50th birthday. I said, "Hey, happy birthday, young fella," because he is. And, they have done so many great things for this city. They've done so many great things for millions and millions of people. It was a neat opportunity serving them. We would have about 1.5 million to 2 million visitors a year come to the silos here in downtown Waco just to visit. People would come from, multiple continents, just journeys after journeys. People would come just in order to celebrate finishing their chemo treatments, whatever it was. And that was one of the things that really drew me in, even to Chip and Joanna. Again, we want to leave people better off than we found them.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what we do to do that. It doesn't matter if you happen to be on the janitorial staff here at the Hankomer School of Business at Baylor University. I see this one gentleman who's on that staff every day, and I make sure he knows he's seen, he's loved, and he's known.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I mean, honestly, I think that that's just an art that we can so easily miss in life.
Michael and I spent many times at one of your coffee shops you were running or overseeing as a leader, and you knew every person in there, and you took moments to have human interaction and connection with them. So you led by example from my point of view. And by the way, what episode was your house on?
So our house was not on Fixer Upper. We call it a Flipper Upper. So it was not featured on the show.
Too bad.
Much like you were saying, John, Chip and Joe really started their careers flipping homes. And they kind of kept that going. There were about 5 of them when I joined the company that we wanted to make sure we closed out. But there's about 5 or 6 fixer-uppers that I know within spitting distance of our house. Again, Waco's not that big of a city, and there's a lot of really neat stories, and a lot of my friends in town, a lot of my former coworkers from Magnolia, including people that were within my organization, were on the show and just felt so drawn to the overall story that they wanted to become part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I credit them for a lot of Melanie's confidence, even over the years. She's done so much now, and our hearts were similar, in the idea of trying to deliver hospitality and love through our work, and we felt that's what they were doing through their work. So, congratulations for any help you gave them and you steered them through probably some of those big radical changes where they became owners of or partners in the Discovery Channel.
Absolutely.
But you also started using, now let's jump onto another thing you shared with me, is that you'd be open to helping family offices.
Yeah.
And you kind of saw what happens as a family grows of an influence. So what is your perspective now on helping family offices?
Yeah, and it's a great thing. The way that I originally petitioned this with Chip and Joanna was, the complexity inherent in their daily and personal lives were such that you kind of had to take a step back and look at it no differently than a business. And in a lot of ways, we set off to really kind of do that, to formalize some things and just to help them manage the visibility around that. But there was also a need for just trying to take this amorphous, complex organism and try to make it a little bit more malleable and a little bit more manageable. So just how do we think about the rudiments of the day-to-day? How do we think about, how do we know whether or not we are looking forward to achieving the things that we set out to? What are our goals in life? How do we want to leave our kids better off? How do we want to leave the areas of benevolence better off when we're done someday with this? How do we want to live when we're done being celebrities and business owners? And again, it's mostly just being able to kind of visioneer the future and ensure that we kind of pull it back to the present and help navigate and chart a course. And so that was a lot of it. We looked at how do we structure their life? How do we put together trust structures and all these complex things, but make sure that we're protecting what they're building so that it can be utilized for the greatest good in the future. We made some investments with their capital, didn't just put it in a bunch of banks, didn't just, kind of make bets on single stocks. We said, look, we need to be much more strategic about how, we put your capital away and how do we manage your properties and, looking at a ranch and not just making it a hobby ranch, but how do we operate it as a business? So, from my point of view, Josh, what really kind of helped that along was the trust that we built and the relationship that we had. And when I think about the family office world, it's not all that different than a lot of, athletes in the professional world. I mentored a professional athlete for a number of years, still kind of do, and he was an NFL player for about 9 years. And there's so much advice out there that comes from origins that aren't necessarily pure. And trying to build trust is difficult because you don't know who you're going to be able to trust. You don't know where to gather the expertise. And so what we did for Chip and Joe is we said, look, we understand how to go out and tag expertise. We know how to go find people who are knowledgeable and trustworthy, and trust us with that. And that was me and my team. And we went out and procured those things. We presented it to Chip and Joe as best we could in lay terms. And we said, look, at the end of the day, this is your world. It's your money. It's your vision. But here's what we would recommend. What do you think? And that was born out of spending a lot of time with them and understanding what their preferences and priorities were, but also just building relationship. You know me, Josh. I mean, again, for an accountant, I'm a relational guy. I joke around a lot that accountants tend to be extroverted, gregarious people, or at least I do. And, I think that's what enabled me with Chip and Joanna to really have impact.
Yeah, like I felt you were always seeking the good of their needs and their business, and you're very much focused. As a matter of fact, that brings me to the final thing that we've got to share is our passion. You helped introduce Melanie and I to Unbound Now, and I think for a period of time you served them, did you not? This is a wonderful nonprofit.
I served them unofficially as an advisor for their their prior CEO, who was the founder, and her name is Susan Peters. She's a Baylor alumnus and
love her.
Really just, her main moniker earlier in the day when she found out that human trafficking was unfortunately alive and well everywhere. And in particular here in Waco, Texas, her thing was not in my city. I'm not standing idly by. No. And now that organization, as you know, Josh, they're global. And we had the pleasure last year bringing 7 of our Baylor students from the business school here over to Spain. We gathered a bunch of Unbound Now's global leadership from Mongolia, Indonesia, Poland, here in the U.S. And our students got to speak with them, learn about the problem of trafficking and how global and how interwoven into all society it is. But they got to teach them the basics of accounting and finance and budgeting. And it was just absolutely glorious because we were talking to people who had a different focus and emphasis in their learning, whether they've engaged in those topics in the past, different languages, different cultures, all of those things. And it was great. But look, I think one of the things I love most about what Unbound Now is doing, and Helen and I still do serve on their board in Europe, it's really just about the story of one. If they can save one individual, if they can prevent one individual from falling into the trap of the struggle and the awfulness of that human trafficking is, then that's great. That's a victory. And, we've done that with them in Poland. We've done that with them in Europe. We've done that with them here in town.
Well,
I'm really proud of their work.
Oh, you should be proud of it. And it was an absolute tremendous honor that you invited Melanie and I down a couple of years ago to be there to meet them all. And let me tell you from their site. So for those listening right now, if you want to join all of us in supporting them, it's unboundnow.org. And it says this year they've saved 1,520 people. Last year, 833. And regrettably, there are 50 million poor children and people being trafficked right now. It's overwhelming. And when it's overwhelming, but John, you also help a group that fights human trafficking, correct?
Yep. Aerial recovery. They're doing great things as well. So it's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the biggest things we've noted is, each of these organizations needs to flourish, no doubt. But when they really start coming together and figuring out how to work in complementary fashions, man, that's when I think the good work and the good impact can be had. And there's a lot need out there. You have to educate, you have to work with law enforcement. Law enforcement oftentimes, as you probably know, John, they're ill-equipped to contend with this. Just sheer numbers, Josh, to your point. And so 1,520 people, at least in Unbound Now's case, those are actual people that were in actual slavery that, have now been rescued from that and have the opportunity to be restored from it.
It's awesome. As we wind down there, unless Josh, do you have another question? Or
no, I was going to say we could do this for hours, but I wanted to let you go ahead and make sure we support Michael as much as we can. We want to get him in front of the right people. Yeah.
So how do our listeners connect with you, Michael?
Yeah. So if they look me up on LinkedIn, it's Michael Rodriguez, and they can just do a search on Michael Rodriguez Baylor or Michael Rodriguez Waco, Texas. They'll find me. And, my objective is, I want to join some more boards of companies, really come alongside leadership teams, help them to greater effect and greater accomplishment. Companies that, on the other hand, as an advisor doing either raising capital, whether equity or debt, looking to kind of build sustainable growth platforms, whether organic growth, just building their existing business, or inorganic growth by virtue of mergers and acquisitions, or looking to sell their companies. Those are all things that I've done, I've invested in, I've grown the skill set for. I just love coming alongside other leaders and just help them see, much more clearly the paths that can be before them, and then help them get down those paths. Awesome. So look forward to any way that I can be helping anyone that's out there.
We can't wait. We can't wait to see the next time we get you on the show. We'll talk about another great story or two. Michael, thanks for all the great work you're doing.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, guys. Take care.
Damn straight. We just got buddy. We got to the end of another great show. And everyone listening right now, you're the family and friends. Thanks for staying till the end.
That was so fun. And hey, hit the like, hit subscribe. We're here to serve you guys. That's why we're doing this show. Josh is not paying me. I'm doing this off of my quote unquote sweat equity because we want to make a difference in your life. And then that ripple effect will continue to touch the world.
Hey, amen, brother. Please check us out on capitalhacking.com, all the social media threads. And yes, I know you've probably already sent this episode to one of your best friends. Thank you. We love you. Just go right into your iPhone, hit the plus symbol. We'll talk to you later. See you next week.
Share.